Hey there, I'm Chris. I just read Jaws, and it is very weird. Jaws. You've seen the movie. Big scary shark eats a bunch of people in a small town that actually isn't apparently in New England as I thought it was, until a couple of the boys set out on a fishing trip to blow him up with an oxygen tank and a single bullet. Except in the book it just dies, like straight up just drops dead in the water after it gets stabbed a couple times. Yeah, I know. On that note, I'm going to be discussing Jaws, both the book and the movie, and how the latter is probably the best book-to-movie adaptation ever made.
Some bad hat, Harry.
Overall, the movie is remarkably faithful to the book. Spielberg keeps many of the key themes and plot points from the story, at least those that have to do with the shark, and throws them together with some long takes and some effective sound design to create what became known as the very first blockbuster. That said, the book spends a lot more time on shore. Where the movie spends about 51 minutes, 40% of its runtime out at sea hunting the shark, the book spends only about a quarter of its page count on the trip. What does the movie cut out? Well, it's a bit complicated.
Door's open. Mind if I come in? Matt Hooper.
Oh, hi, Ellen Brody.
Your husband's home.
Yes.
I'd really like to talk to him.
Yes, so would I.
First and foremost, the film changes some key character motivations of the protagonists, Chief Brody, his wife Ellen, and Hooper. In the movie, Brody and his wife are new to Amity. This is his first summer as the police chief. In the book, however, Brody's lived in the town his entire life as a year-round resident. His wife used to be a summer vacationer, a member of the upper-class elite that owned summer houses on the island. She spends much of the novel trying to reconnect with her old, richer friends, and misses the freedom of a life without ties to Amity. Most indicative of this characterization in the book, she used to date the older brother of Hooper, the ichthyologist shark expert. One thing leads to the next, and she's an affair with Hooper, a driving force for suspicion between her and her husband, as well as Hooper and the chief throughout their time working together. These conflicts, the affair and the resulting suspicions, take up a significant duration of the novel and work to emphasize the theme that people suck, a theme that is still somewhat present in the film, but to a lesser degree. Much lesser. I mean, in the book, Quint kills a pregnant dolphin, just to use its unborn fetus as shark bait. Instead of featuring violent screaming arguments on the ship between Brody and Hooper where the shark guy is accused of sleeping with the police chief's wife, the movie gets to have drunken sea shanties and arm wrestling.
By land or sea or foam.
But what kind? What kind of shark?
It's a tiger shark.
A what?
In the movie, where Ellen and Hooper have never met and never get busy, the only real sources of conflict are the town mayor and the shark. Brody wants to close the beach, but is convinced not to by the mayor. The novel features this conflict a lot more in depth, including a character that was removed entirely from the movie, the editor of the Amity newspaper. With his involvement, we learn the town is ruled by a board of individuals who control the news and laws in order to best benefit the town. Brody wants to close the beach after the first shark attack, but the mayor manipulates the newspaper and town into keeping the beaches open while portraying this as a decision made by Brody. Even after multiple deaths occurred, the mayor refuses to close the beaches for reasons unknown. However, after a few more run-ins with the shark, news of the town's little fish issue brings in tourists who want to see people get eaten, but nobody wants to go in the water, ultimately putting the town in financial trouble down the road. Amity is made out to be a very delicate town, where winters are only survived based on summer income, and even during a good year, much of the town is on food stamps in the off-season. But this doesn't convince Brody that it's worth the death of children on the beaches, and somehow the mayor is found to have connections to the mafia, and that's why he wanted to keep everything open. And the mafia kills Brody's cat when he tries to close the beaches. Yeah, it's a pretty weird book. This darker, poorer side of Amity and the mayor is skimmed over in the movie, instead making it a much more simpler financial issue that the town will lose money. This simplified version of the issue is also easier to overcome, as the mayor is easily scared into contracting Quint, the shark killer, after it terrorizes the beach of swimmers. The theme of people suck is more or less simplified in order to make the characters more likable. Instead of an adulterous wife and scandalous scientist, we focus on humanity. The people on shore, namely the mayor, suck and care about money, but when the boys go out to sea, they find some commonalities, like their assorted scars and motivations, and become comrades. Also, in the movie, Hooper survives. In the book, he brings the shark cages away from him to take underwater photos of the shark in order to document its size. Quint says it's suicide, and it is. But in the movie, he brings the cage as a place from which to shoot the shark with a harpoon and inject him with some poison stuff. But there too, the shark wrecks the cage, but instead of getting chomped, he swims to the bottom and does not die. Good for him. This creates a much more interesting and satisfying conclusion for the screen, where Brody is able to outwardly reflect on his successes and sacrifices. Brody hates the water and the ocean, but in order to keep the town safe from the greedy, bloodied hands of the mayor, he went on a fishing trip on a boat that sank to kill a man-eating shark.
I used to hate the water.
I can't imagine why.
The movie spends a lot of time legitimizing the threat of a shark with hokey science, calling it a rogue shark that supports the theory of territoriality, the idea that sharks might stay in one area until all available food is eaten and then move on to the next. I reached out to a shark scientist, Dr. David Shiffman, who has actually been asked about the movie so often that he has an entire article written about it, with commonly asked questions. He pointed me in that direction, where one can read specifically how the movie twists an unpopular theory into on-screen fact, and the ecologically dangerous implications of that creative decision. On the other hand, the book doesn't go out of its way to explain the shark as some scientifically possible phenomenon. In fact, the book describes the shark haunting Amity as preternatural, something that cannot and should not be explained. It makes the shark into some fantasy monster, rather than something that could really be lurking in the water next time you go for a dip. While that may be less exciting and scary for a general audience, it is a more responsible route for storytelling when you consider the thousands of sharks that were slaughtered after the theatrical release of Jaws. Both the book and the movie approach the story of Jaws in very different ways, but both come to satisfying conclusions according to their mediums. If you're looking for a more exciting, engaging version of the story, the movie is definitely more your speed. But if you're looking for a more character-driven story, the book definitely has its perks.